There are some passages in the Bible that are controversial because there are many different interpretations. One passage like this that many people view as a prophecy of the end of the world is Matthew 24. In my previous video, I explained the three primary views of the end times and explained how I am postmillennial. If you want to learn more about those, you should check out my last video. In that video, someone asked a very helpful question, which was, since I'm postmillennial, how does Matthew 24 fit into that? So most people mainly believe that Matthew 24 is a passage about the future because of the language that Jesus uses about the destruction that's coming. But if that's true, then we have an apparent contradiction, because Jesus also says in Matthew 24:34, after describing the huge cosmic destruction about the sun going dark, the stars falling from the sky, he says this, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all of these things take place." So it's a common principle in good exegesis, or understanding the Bible, that we need to let the clear things inform us about the unclear things and not the other way around. So there are two major pieces to this puzzle. What does Jesus mean by this generation? And what does Jesus mean by the kind of destruction that's going to happen? So one interesting thing to note is that the Bible is full of language of cosmic destruction. For example, in Isaiah 13, it talks about the destruction of Babylon, which we know already happened. And it says this, "Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation, and also to destroy sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place." So the question is, was the earth really, literally, physically shaken out of its place? Did the stars really all suddenly stop shining? Did the sun go dark? No, not objectively speaking. But this was the kind of language used because Babylon's world was going to be destroyed. Their sky was going to go dark. Not the world for everybody, but the world specifically for Babylon, and that's true. So the question is it possible that since Jesus used very similar language in Matthew 24, that he could be referring to an event that's not the total end of the world? Now, I think so. So that's one option. And the other option is that people who are committed to a futurist interpretation of Matthew 24 have tried to solve this apparent contradiction by saying that Jesus isn't actually talking to the people that he's talking to. Actually, he's talking to whoever happens to be the future generation reading the Bible when these things actually take place that he's talking about, the destruction. But Jesus doesn't actually make any reference to any future generation at any point in his dialogue. The only reason to believe that he's referring to a future generation is if we presuppose that Jesus is talking about the end of the whole world. But that's what we're trying to figure out. Another problem is that would be very deceptive to the people that Jesus was talking to. A natural reading shows that Jesus is actually talking about the generation he's speaking to because they asked him a question and he is answering it about when these things are going to happen. And this is actually no problem at all. The contradiction doesn't exist at all if the destruction that Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24 actually happened before that generation passed away. So it is possible that this cosmic destruction that Jesus was talking about really did happen before that generation passed away, say in the next 40 years or so, since a biblical generation is usually 40 years. And if Jesus died around 33 AD, then the destruction that Jesus was talking about, if he was telling the truth, and he was, must have happened sometime before 73 AD. So we need to ask ourselves, was there some kind of huge cataclysmic event that happened regarding the temple in Jerusalem that Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24, sometime prior to 73 AD? And surprisingly, the answer is yes. Jerusalem fell. Jerusalem was destroyed, and especially the temple was destroyed. The center and most important location, Jerusalem, of the Jewish faith, along with the temple through which Jews interacted with God himself, was destroyed. This was a cataclysmic event for the Jews, much like the destruction of Babylon was to the Babylonians. The fall of Jerusalem was not a sudden or isolated event. It was the culmination of decades of Roman exploitation and internal divisions among the Jewish people. It exposed the fragility of both imperial power and revolutionary movements, and it left a scar that reshaped Jewish life, worship, and identity for centuries to come, even echoing into today. The destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 was the result of a long buildup of political, religious, and social tensions between the Jewish population and the Roman Empire. Judea had been under Roman rule since 63 BC, when Pompey the Great captured Jerusalem. While the Romans allowed a degree of religious autonomy, they maintained tight political control and installed local leaders like Herod the Great, who were often seen as corrupt puppets of the empire, and many of them were. Over time, resentment festered among many Jews, particularly those who viewed Roman authority as a violation of their covenant with God. By the 1st century AD, several Jewish groups had emerged with differing responses to Roman occupation. The Pharisees emphasized religious purity and law. The Sadducees cooperated with Rome to maintain their priestly authority, and the Essenes withdrew into isolated communities. But it was the Zealots, fiercely anti-Roman and often militant, who would play a pivotal role in what came next. They believed that God alone was king, which is true, and that violent resistance to Roman rule was not only justified, but necessary. And we will see exactly where the denial of Christ and violent revolutionism led their nation. Tensions reached a breaking point in AD 66, sparked by a series of provocations. One Roman official seized temple funds, and in retaliation, Jewish rebels attacked Roman outposts and expelled the Roman garrison from Jerusalem. The revolt quickly escalated into full-scale war, known today as the First Roman-Jewish War. The rebels set up their own government and began minting coins, which was a symbolic declaration of independence from the Roman Empire. Rome responded, of course, with overwhelming force. Emperor Nero, who was popular, among other things, for beheading Christians and putting their heads on pikes lining the main roads to the Roman Empire, appointed General Vespasian to suppress the uprising. Vespasian and his son Titus began systematically retaking territory throughout Galilee and Judea, leaving Jerusalem as the final stronghold. But in AD 68, Nero committed suicide, triggering a political crisis in Rome. Vespasian suspended the campaign, returned to Rome, and was eventually declared emperor. Titus was left to complete the mission. Inside Jerusalem, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The city was divided by bitter factionalism. Competing Jewish groups, including zealots and other hardliners, turned against one another in violent civil conflict. Food supplies were destroyed in the chaos, worsening the impact of the Roman siege that began early in AD 70. Roman forces encircled the city, cutting off all access to food and water. Starvation and disease spread rapidly among the population. After months of siege warfare, Roman troops finally breached Jerusalem's defenses. What followed was a brutal and devastating assault. The temple, the most sacred site in Judaism, was set ablaze, despite orders from Titus to preserve it, thereby fulfilling Jesus' words in Matthew 24 that the temple was going to be destroyed. The city of Jerusalem was razed. Tens of thousands were killed, and many more were taken captive and sold into slavery. It seems to me that this event lines up perfectly with a straightforward, literal interpretation of Matthew 24, and it fits beautifully into postmillennialism. If you want to learn more about the views of the end times, you can check out my previous video, and I'm also working on a series of videos going into more practical applications of an optimistic eschatology that you can look forward to. My last video on eschatology has been received really well, and many of my previous videos on dispensationalism have been regaining traction. So if you enjoy these videos and want to encourage me to make more like it, tell me with a thumbs up or a subscribe. And if you've been around a while and want to help me improve the show, you can support me on Patreon. And as always, feel free to ask questions or leave comments, and I will catch you in the next video. God bless.